automated tools come in, it doesn't mean your job's gone. It means, how do I do my job more effectively or do more, right? That's what it's really allowing us to do, is do more things, or more effective things. So it's all perception, I think, on how you view it, which allows like Alex to go in and do different things of content, or Caitlin on the UX side go make more decisions and changes to a website than she could have before, because she has better data at her fingertips.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like all of our trends have kind of come down to quality versus quantity. While we have access to a lot of quantity, we still need to focus on the quality in order to be effective.
Yeah, and that's difficult to like find sometimes, what you should focus on, and that's a challenge in itself.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing about all the AI tools, is that honestly the fundamentals haven't changed very much.
Agreed.
Sure.
It's just that you need to make sure that quality is still important. Relevant content is still important. Establishing authority is still important. Having a good UX, still important. Having a good targeting strategy for digital ads, still important. But I think it's just, you can do more of it.
And that's a great point, Alex. When Google's done algorithm updates, if you like historically read about them from way back in 2012 or so, when I started, up until now, it's all pushing towards the same thing. They want more quality on Google, and they want a better user experience. That's the core of what it's doing. The changes might have slightly different things they're attacking or adjusting to get there, but it's like future-proofing yourself. You build a quality website with good content, not just AI-driven stuff. You're future-proofing yourself. When Google gets more sophisticated and pulls out more and more AI stuff that's been written, you're in a better spot. So I think it's thinking in that sense. The fundamentals will remain the same. It's how you go about serving better content, serving better ads, right? How do you get to that point?
The table stakes is that you have a website. You need to just have a better website now. Your website has to be good and meet the needs of your users. There was a study that came out somewhat recently that says that Google is now using the user experience of a website to influence your rankings in search engines as well, how prominently they put it in the search. It's just becoming so much more prevalent that you have to have good user experience on your site in order for it to be an effective website.
I think the other thing too that is also really important is on the client side, and I've been on the client side before, you get so caught up in organizationally, your own structure, the way you do things internally. And then you'd have, John in finance who's, I want to change this on the site. I don't think it's working. I don't like it. And the UX research piece takes all of that subjectivity out of the equation and just, like you said, focuses on what the users need, so that you could go back to John in finance and say, this is something that is worth changing because this is contributing to that positive user experience. So have you seen that a lot with some of the clients that you work with, where it just takes that organizational subjectivity out of it?
Oh, so much. I feel like sometimes we get brought in to be, the third party expert, but also really for us, we can lean on data and say, there's always going to be so many opinions, right? Of this is what's the most important to this person. This is most important to this person. And we can come in and say, well, this is what's most important to your users. I think it's very easy for businesses to get wrapped up in both internal politics and what you want your site to be, and sometimes forget about your users who are actually going to be using the site, who are really the people that you need to make sure can use the site.
Good audience.
So I think having that data to support, this is what they need. And so this is really what you should be focusing on, and, figuring out ways to meet your business needs but secondary, honestly, to theirs is really what's important nowadays. And we can provide that data that kind of shows why and what to do to best meet those needs.
One related topic that has come up, particularly because of the European Accessibility Act, but also just generally over the years, is accessibility overlays and this issue of using them. So tools like Accessibility and others like that built to your site or sit on top of your site, those aren't necessarily going to magically put you in compliance with accessibility standards, correct?
Right. So those widgets, if you will, or plugins, lots of ways to sort of talk about them. They are an overlay. They're not part of the code of your website. The European Accessibility Act actually explicitly states that they are not sufficient for compliance.
Okay.
So that's extremely important for companies to know right now.
Absolutely.
Website owners need to ensure that their sites are accessible without those subscriptions or without those third-party tools. Overlays are generally disliked by the web accessibility community. Accessibility experts have found that they can sometimes make your website worse. One of the places where I've actually seen that, and it's a little bit heartbreaking, is when you take a website that is not bad, is fairly accessible, is pretty good in the whole range of accessibility, and adding an overlay not only costs the company money, and it can get in the way of other structure. It sits there over your site, and we've seen it block a mobile menu, right? So you can't access the mobile menu because the widget's in the way, right? So imagine taking a site that's really not that bad and putting a widget on, spending money on it, and your website just became worse. I've also seen it.
That's a good way to describe it.
Yeah. I've seen other ways that it can also, rather than improving things, make more challenges and roadblocks for all users, actually.
Right. Yeah. That's
so
unfortunate.
Certainly with the European Accessibility Act explicitly stating widgets are not, and then the real issues that we've seen, it's not something that we can recommend at all right now.
Talking about SEO at a high level, what are some of those kind of oldie but goodie, I guess, for lack of a better term, strategies that you feel still apply today that marketers should really continue to focus on?
Yeah, I feel like it's really easy to get distracted by new tactics, especially nowadays. There's a lot of flashy stuff that's coming out around AI, a lot of tools that spawn out around that, and a lot of different ways of approaching SEO, but ultimately it all comes back to different ways of servicing the same fundamental goal, which is to try and provide authoritative and helpful content, to try and establish your authority in a given topic, and then to make that something that your intended audience is searching for. So it's kind of that index point of understanding what your audience is actively looking for, not focusing too much on just, this is what I want to say. I don't need to do keyword research. I'm just going to put out my message and hope it works. But like actually trying to reverse engineer from what you think your audience is looking for, and really trying to emphasize, the phrase I use is serving the audience as much as possible. That the idea is that you want to find them where they are in search and just create good content for them. And in that way, that's been true of good SEO forever, and good UX and good content strategy. That just, we always just want to make sure we're providing in our website experiences what the user is looking for when they're looking for it. And so I don't think, even with AI and all those tools, the core goal hasn't really changed. And the guiding principles are still very much, how can we create good content that people want to engage with? So I always advocate for, slowing down and not diving into a new shiny tactic too quickly, and making sure that it serves strategic goals and that we're, staying focused on what we're trying to do.
It's definitely possible to spend too little. It's definitely possible to spend too much. I will say spending too much up front, though, isn't a huge issue. That's more as you've built out your campaigns. Are you just spending money on wasted campaigns? But when you first start a campaign, let's say you're starting from nothing, the right budget is extremely hard to come up with, especially if we don't have conversion data on your site. If I understand, you haven't done digital ads before, but we know your conversions from other channels, we can at least back into what we expect based on search velocity from tools like SEMrush. Our goal is to, in that first month, reach at least 15 to 20 conversions, because that's the point where the AI and Google ads can really start to optimize. If you're getting fewer conversions than that, you're going to want to bump budget, because you want to get enough conversions that it can effectively optimize. So early on, if you don't have a lot of data, you're not going to spend too much, because you're going to learn quicker. But I understand from a business perspective, you might not be able to stretch your budget that far. So that's where we try to come up with a strong estimate to get you that 15 to 20 range. And we kind of got to let it run sometimes to get there. I can always estimate things, but a first estimate, especially if we do not have conversion data, is a bit of an educated guess. And I try to, kind of tell clients, we suggest this amount. You can do less if your business can't handle that, because obviously you don't want to overextend yourself. But if you can do more, and we haven't seen a campaign before,
then you're going to learn quicker, right? And we want to learn as fast as we can, and then we can pull back when needed. If a client's coming to us and they already have campaigns and we can see their conversion data, assuming those conversions are accurate, because we'll take a look at that as well, then we can have a really strong estimate of what I think you should spend per month.
The 4 F's are anytime you have a site that stuff is difficult to find because there's such a large volume. There's a fatigue, second F, of too many clicks to be able to find what you're looking for. A very common one is failure to find. So you haven't got good titles, good metadata on your site because there's so much stuff. And so people can't find it, and there's a failure in the search exit. And then finally, when the search results come back, the final F is called famine, which is the inability, a poor description, a poor meta description, where you end up, it found the right stuff, but the description is so poor, it has maintained it in a readable, usable way that you can't find it. So not enough information to make a decision. And so these are the failures of complex websites, often caused by the large volume that you have. There's just too much stuff over there.
And you mentioned the 4 V's too. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Everything comes in 4s, I guess. We have the volume is more of a defining factor. So these are rather than the experiences, a little bit more on the volume. So you have gigabytes or terabytes of information. Often, again, in spreadsheets, another one of the pieces is that volume is coming from lots of disparate sources. So it's coming from databases, ERP systems, accounting systems, spreadsheets, text files kept in the marketing department, InDesign files that somebody is using to illustrate everything. All of that stuff amounts to a massive amount of volume. It becomes difficult to maintain and to manage. The variety of stuff that comes in there following on is that you have tables, text files, images, documents, videos, PDFs, and then specialty type files that require special browser plugins to make them all work. That is a challenge, the variety on top of the volume. Then my little v, that's a little abstract, is veracity. And that is because there's so many errors often in those files, omissions, inconsistent formatting of the data, unreliable data, incomplete data, data feed that comes into the website that fails as it's coming in there, not in the same order it was last time, indexed poorly. So all of that becomes at some point in time overwhelming, and people give up. And or they just end up with a lousy experience. Their homepage looks beautiful and the first couple landing pages look beautiful, but as soon as you kind of dig inside there, it's the site, because of the complexity of the volume and the variety of the stuff, it kind of falls apart with the veracity. And then the last V is velocity, which is how often this stuff is changing. So you have to deal with everything we just mentioned, the volume and the variety and the veracity, and now it's changing every day. You're getting a new set of information, especially as the organization gets larger or the amount of information comes in is to grow. So that makes it a challenge.
I think the most important thing to remember is that this is a process, and most people don't do it a lot, right? It's when that 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 year period pops up. Do a little bit of homework, do a little bit of research. There's a lot of stuff available, as you can imagine, out there. Some of it not so good, some of it very good. Tips and tricks like this podcast series that will help you craft an RFP. I would say that the more you can talk to the parties involved, if you're allowed to, the better. I would strongly consider, wherever possible, having 2 types of RFPs, your strategy, then your design, build, and support. If you can do it that way, you are going to succeed. You're going to get better quality responses, especially for the design and build. And you're going to be able to spend the appropriate amount of time with people, making sure that everything you want and your users' needs are accounted for. I think that's the most important thing. Give yourself enough time, do your research, and please, if at all possible, do a website and UX strategy phase before you try to build the entire ecosystem.
Don't oversaturate your message to your audience. And this really comes through on the social media, probably more than other aspects of it. But these young people, and I can speak to it because I have a high schooler right now, they catch on fast and they get irritated if they didn't look to get information from you more than once, and now you're showing up everywhere they go, and that turns them off. So if you're doing retargeting, remarketing, that kind of thing, keep that in mind, that they have their personal space or however they define it, and you won't know if you broke that bubble. But I can tell you, if you're on them every single day, multiple times a day, you have broken the bubble already. The other thing then is to let go of that institutional language that's unique to you. Keep it for inside. People will learn it when they become a part of your community. But when you're trying to reach out and bring in people who may not even know you exist, share some terms that might be easier for them to understand or might be more common that they'll search by, so that you can pop up in those searches when they're looking for the program or what they want to study or what they want to do in their future. Because you don't want to cut yourself off from potential students. And just because we have this beautiful thing called the internet doesn't mean they're getting all of the information they're looking for. You have to have the right terminology in order for that to show.
Don't make assumptions, rely on data. Anytime you're making those assumptions of, well, we understand our students, we understand what they need. If you don't have data to back that up, you don't actually know that that's true. And those needs, they change so often, either technology-wise or just messaging-wise or interpersonally. There's so many things that are changing, especially with the more traditional audience, every single year. So it's really important to make sure you're always getting data on what those students need, tracking what's working, what's not, in terms of convincing them to reach out and work with and apply to the school. Just making sure that you're always going back to data at the end of the day. I'm a data junkie, so I'm a little bit biased, but I honestly do think that it is the best way to make sure that you're not wasting your time on things that just aren't successful.
And it can be very easy to just kind of get spun up in a new channel without actually taking a moment to think about how we're going to use it and how we're going to support it with content going forward. So take a moment, step back, and really assess all those channels and make sure that you're using them strategically. If you look at a lot of university homepages, there's still some that are focused on serving both the prospective student audience and internal audiences and trying to do both on the same page. It's very difficult to do without creating a very bloated, difficult to navigate site. You're going to end up relying on those navigation menus that try and sort people by audience and try and recommend people different resources by audience, when it'd be much easier to just make your homepage recruitment focused and focused all of your content on that, and then filter people through to the other various resources if they get that far into the site. So I would really recommend, because it is still, data supports that it is still a very important place where people go to learn about your institution, in addition to your social media accounts, but the homepage really matters. The last thing I would say is more institutional, especially for larger institutions. I would strongly recommend, if you don't have one already, start the process of creating a central authority on web strategy on campus. Somebody who is going to own the question of overall web strategy, not just developing websites on the technical side, but also somebody who knows the broad suite of digital marketing that can help kind of shepherd your institution forward if the resources exist for it.
What is probably the biggest mistake that we see organizations make with their website RFPs? And that's not starting the RFP process early enough. What does a reasonable project timeline look like?
I would tell you that if we're to release an RFP today, it's still going to be spring of 2025 or even, 2026, before your website is redesigned and relaunched. And that can kind of be shocking for people, particularly people who have a lot of pain and agony of their website today, and to think that they've got to wait another 12 to 18 months. But this is really what we're talking about in terms of starting the process early enough, because that process in and of itself can be, 4 to 8 weeks. Then you have to allow time for vendor Q&A and vendor conference. And then there's the scoring of the responses, and then there's finalist interviews, and then there's selecting, an award winner, and then there's the contract, has to come after that. And then you can actually start. So from a high level, you really can't start soon enough.
A couple things to keep in mind too. Number one, typically a subject matter expert or a project sponsor in the digital space is going to go to procurement and say, hey, we need a website redesign. And they're going to be thinking of it in terms of, weeks, months, what have you, and not really considering the tasks that are wrapped up within each phase of this process. One of the most challenging things, if you are doing user research, and you should be, is A, recruiting those candidates, B, scheduling those candidates, and C, doing follow-ups for focus groups and those types of things if you're doing a combination, one-on-one interviews and focus groups. Those take time. The other component to this is the decision-making, because oftentimes we work with a core team and then a larger team, and then maybe even an executive team. And factoring all of those stakeholders within your timeline from soup to nuts is going to be vitally important. It's probably going to take between 30 and 40% longer than what you think.
The most important thing for a marketer to know about WordPress is that it requires routine maintenance. So WordPress has its core platform, which is, the tool you use to add content and add photos and things along those lines. But then you can also add a theme to give it its look and feel. You can add plugins that add functionality. It works a lot like your phone, right? So you buy a phone and then you can add, apps to it and things like that. Same thing with WordPress. But what WordPress doesn't have that your phone does, it's your phone will auto update itself. And WordPress kind of has it, but it really doesn't. And so you just have to be very with your ongoing maintenance on a monthly basis. And so what I mean by that is really getting someone on your team or being that person on your team that is constantly every month logging in, running updates for all of the things that are running on your website and just making sure everything is functioning correctly. But that's one piece. The other really important piece that has been extremely important in 2024 is security patches. There's been a lot of news very recently in the summer of 24 where plugin developers have been releasing plugins and unknowingly releasing plugins that have a security flaw in them. Ooh. And that the code actually has nefarious code in there that as soon as you install the plugin in WordPress, you're already hacked. I would say develop some sort of plan that you are actively watching notifications if there's a security patch and releasing those and following through and updating them and just doing the monthly maintenance.
But before we dive into the details, we are huge fans of s'mores here at Northwoods, if you didn't know. It's our signature snack. So I'm curious to know, what type of chocolate do you prefer in your s'mores?
Oh, that's the easiest question that I'll probably get all day. It's obviously got to be dark chocolate.
It's got to be a Reese's peanut butter cup.
The best s'more I ever had was when we didn't have graham crackers and we substituted chocolate chip cookies. Ooh. And put them on the grill, like over the campfire.
I will say we normally do Hershey's probably because it's just convenient. But if I'm choosing, it would be a red chili. Kind of give it a little spice.
I like it, the darker the better. Velvety, dark, and a little bit bitter. Ooh. I kind of like because it kind of offsets the marshmallow a little bit.
I would say I'm a purist. I'm a Hershey's chocolate.
Yeah.
Maybe it's my move to Pennsylvania. I'm 2 hours from Hershey, Pennsylvania now.
Maybe you can go tour the plant there.
Yeah. But I'm a pure. I love just a simple Hershey's milk chocolate bar.
Nice.
Just break it apart. Fits perfect.
I'm a big fan of Tabal chocolate. I have to do a product placement plug. I got a little thing over there. This is my brother. My brother Dan is and he that brand, and he sources the cocoa beans from Costa Rica, and he finds farmers that support, and he sources their beans, and he's a bean to bar chocolatier, hosted right here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
That's
got our
great.
Product placement done.
I like it.
Dan owes
Nice
me 3
job.
chocolate bars now.